I begged her to come back until I realized she never actually left me. The cursor blinked on the blank screen, a relentless pulse mocking my inability to create. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my tired eyes, and let my gaze wander around the apartment. It was our sanctuary once, a space alive with the echoes of our shared dreams, film posters from indie festivals plastered on the walls, shelves sagging under the weight of books and vinyl records, and the large window framing the city skyline like a living canvas. Now, it felt hollow, a gallery of relics from a life that had slipped away. Naomi had been gone for 3 weeks, and every corner of this place whispered her name, taunting me with memories I couldn't escape. She hadn't left me completely, or so I told myself. Sure, she packed a suitcase and moved into her sister's guesthouse a few miles away, but it wasn't a clean break. We still talked almost every day, her voice filtering through the phone like a lifeline I clung to with both hands. "I need space, Adrian," she'd said, her words soft but firm. "I need to figure out who I am without you." I didn't get it. How could she need to find herself apart from me when we'd spent years building this life together? But I didn't argue. Instead, I nodded, promised to wait, and held on to the hope that this was just a detour, a pause before she'd come back home. I couldn't let go. Every morning, I woke up to the same routine, forcing myself out of bed to face a day that felt emptier without her. I'd brew coffee, but it tasted wrong, bitter and flat without the pinch of cinnamon she used to sprinkle in. I'd sit at my desk, pretending to work on a film project, but my mind would drift, replaying our last conversation like a loop I couldn't stop. She'd sat on the couch that night, her eyes glistening with tears, saying, "I still love you, just not like this." What did that even mean? I'd begged her to stay, my voice breaking as I promised to be better, to fix whatever I'd broken. But she shook her head, grabbed her bag, and left, though not entirely. She still wore her wedding ring, a thin gold band that caught the light when we met for coffee last week. She'd hug me goodbye, her arms lingering, her breath warm against my shoulder. It was enough to keep me tethered, to make me believe she wasn't really gone. The apartment mirrored my unraveling. Dishes from last night's takeout sat unwashed in the sink, a testament to my lack of energy. Laundry spilled out of the hamper, and my desk was a mess of crumpled scripts and cold coffee mugs. I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror, eyes sunken with dark circles, a scruffy jaw I hadn't bothered to shave, clothes hanging loose on a frame that Naomi used to tease for being too skinny. Now, I looked like a ghost of myself, a 35-year-old filmmaker who'd lost his muse and his moorings. I'd always been the dependable one, the guy who saw the best in people, who gave second chances too easily. Maybe that was my problem. I was too open, too willing to believe in the romance of us, even when the evidence was piling up against it. I tried to fill the void. Every day, I'd craft messages to her, typing out my heart in texts I hoped would spark something, remind her of the nights we'd stayed up late, laughing over old movies, or the way she'd danced to jazz records in our living room. I even started sketching out a short film about our love story, a desperate idea that if I could capture what we had on screen, she'd see it too and come back. But her replies were always vague, a dance of words that kept me guessing. "I miss you," she'd text, followed by, "But I need this." Need what? I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but I didn't. I just waited, clinging to the moments when her voice softened, when she'd cry on the phone and say she wasn't sure what she wanted. It was hard, this limbo where we weren't together but weren't apart. Doubt started creeping in, though I fought it hard. Last week, my friend Mark dropped a comment that stuck like a splinter. "Saw Naomi at that new cafe downtown," he'd said, casual as anything. She was with some guy, looked pretty cozy. I'd laughed it off, told him he must have misread the vibe. Naomi wouldn't do that, she still wore her ring, still said she loved me. But the image lingered, a crack in the foundation of my hope. Who was this guy? A friend? Someone from work? My mind spun, but I shoved the thought down, refusing to let it take root. She wasn't gone, not really. She was just figuring things out. That's what I kept telling myself. I tried to move forward, even tested the waters elsewhere. A friend set me up on a date a few days ago, nice woman, sharp sense of humor, but I couldn't focus. Her laugh wasn't Naomi's, her stories didn't carry the same weight. I excused myself early, mumbling about a headache, and came back to this empty apartment, feeling more lost than ever. Yesterday, walking through the park, I saw a couple on a bench, hands intertwined, smiles wide. It hit me like a wave, the ache of what I'd lost. Then a street musician started playing Chasing Cars, our song, and the lyrics tore through me. If I just lay here, would you lie with me and just forget the world? I stopped, leaning against a tree, my chest tight. I couldn't keep doing this, living half in the past, half in a future I couldn't predict. Back at my desk, the cursor kept blinking, a metronome of my indecision. I thought about all the times I'd begged her to come back, to choose me again. Maybe I was wrong to keep chasing her. Maybe she wasn't as far away as I thought, not physically, not emotionally. She was still here, in the spaces between my hope and my fear, a presence I couldn't shake. I shook my head, pushing the idea away. It was time to stop waiting, to start asking questions, to face whatever this was. I grabbed my jacket, deciding on a walk to clear my head. The city lights glowed outside, indifferent to my turmoil, and I stepped toward the door, unaware that the truth was already closing in, ready to rewrite everything I thought I knew. I was sitting at my desk, hunched over my laptop, dragging the cursor across a timeline of video clips that refused to make sense tonight. The project was due tomorrow, some rushed promotional piece for a client who kept changing their mind, but I couldn't concentrate. Naomi's voice from earlier kept replaying in my head, flat, distracted, telling me she'd be tied up with a work thing and not to wait up. I didn't push her for details, even though the urge gnawed at me, because pushing always made her pull away harder. I just said I had plans too, a flimsy lie that hung between us, unchallenged. The apartment felt suffocating without her, every sound amplified in the stillness, the hum of the fridge, the faint drip from the kitchen faucet I kept meaning to fix. I got up, pacing the living room, my eyes catching on the iPad resting on the coffee table. It used to be ours, back when sharing didn't come with second guessing, but now it was hers, left behind like an afterthought. I knew it was still linked to our old account, she hadn't bothered to untangle that knot yet. I picked it up, running my thumb along the edge, hesitating. Snooping wasn't my style, never had been, because trust was the deal we'd made when we started this life together. But lately, trust felt like a word I kept repeating to convince myself it still meant something. I tapped the screen awake, and there we were at last year's film festival, frozen in a photo, her arm looped through mine, both of us laughing under bright lights. My throat tightened at the sight. I swiped to the Messages app, telling myself I just wanted to see if she'd sent anything since her call, maybe something small to bridge the gap growing between us. The app opened, and a notification slid into view, a name I didn't recognize, Eli, with a snippet that stopped my heart. He's still begging? Impressive. My stomach twisted hard, a cold sweat breaking out across my palms. Who was Eli? And what did still begging mean? Was that about me? I stood there, staring, every instinct screaming to put the thing down and walk away, but my finger moved anyway, opening the thread. The first thing I saw was a photo, and it hit me like a kick to the chest. Naomi, hair messy, sprawled across a bed I'd never seen, smirking at the camera. The timestamp was last night, when she'd told me over the phone she'd been alone, crying, missing me too much to sleep. Below it, Eli's words, he's still begging? Impressive. You've got him wrapped around your finger. Her response was a row of laughing faces, then, he thinks I'm conflicted. It's almost too easy. The room tilted, and I grabbed the couch to keep from falling, my breath coming in shallow gasps. This wasn't happening, not Naomi, not the woman I'd spent 8 years loving, building a home with. My eyes burned, tears spilling over before I could stop them, but then a laugh broke out of me, sharp and jagged, bouncing off the walls. It grew, wild and unstoppable, until I was doubled over, clutching my sides, crying and laughing at the same time. All those messages I'd sent, pleading for her to talk to me, to come back, and she was here, with him, turning me into a joke. The iPad slipped from my hands, clattering onto the floor, and the laughter choked off into something else, a sick, churning ache that sent me stumbling to the bathroom. I barely made it to the sink before everything came up, sour and bitter, my knuckles white against the counter. I stared into the mirror, barely recognizing the hollow-eyed man looking back, pale, shaking, a stranger wearing my face. How had I missed this? The late nights she blamed on work, the way she'd brush off my questions with a sigh, the plans she'd cancel with excuses that never quite added up. I'd seen it all and told myself it was nothing, that she just needed time. I splashed water on my face, the cold biting into my skin, trying to pull myself together, but my thoughts were a tangle of rage and hurt spinning out of control. Who was Eli? How long had she been lying? And why keep me dangling instead of cutting me loose? I staggered back to the couch and sank down, the iPad still glowing where it fell, their words taunting me. I couldn't touch it again, not yet, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I grabbed my phone instead, scrolling to Naomi's name, my thumb hovering over the call button. I wanted to hear her voice, to yell, to make her explain how she could do this, but I stopped myself. What would I even say? I saw your messages? Who's Eli? She'd just lie again, or flip it back on me, accuse me of crossing a line by looking. She was too good at that, twisting things until I questioned what I knew. I needed to play this smarter, to figure out what I was dealing with before she could talk her way out of it. Breathing deep, I picked up the iPad and scrolled further months of messages, starting long before she'd packed a bag and left, full of playful banter, secret meetups, little digs at me. One from Eli jumped out, "He's too soft, Naomi. You need someone who can challenge you." Her reply, "I know. But he's safe. It's hard to let go of that." Safe. The word landed heavy, sinking into me. 8 years, and I was just her fallback, a cushion for when things got rough. I set the iPad down, my head pounding with the weight of it all. I couldn't stay here, surrounded by her absence and my stupidity. I needed air, space to think. I grabbed my jacket and keys, heading out into the night, the city alive with noise and movement that felt miles away from me. I walked without direction, hands shoved deep in my pockets, the chill seeping through my clothes. Every step replayed her lies, my blindness, the life I thought we had shredded apart in a single night. Then I saw Mark at a cafe up ahead, hunched over a coffee, frowning at his phone. He'd warned me weeks ago, said he'd spotted Naomi with some guy, but I'd brushed it off, too afraid to believe him. I walked over, my voice rough when I spoke. "Hey, Mark." He looked up, startled, then winced at the sight of me. "Adrian? You look awful, what's wrong?" I dropped into the chair across from him, the truth spilling out before I could hold it back. "You were right about Naomi. She's been with someone else." His eyes widened, and he set his cup down hard. "Shit, man, I'm sorry. I hoped I was wrong. How'd you find out?" I shook my head, dodging the question. "Doesn't matter. I just don't know what to do." He leaned in, voice firm. "You've got to call her out on it, get it all out there. She can't keep screwing with you like this." I nodded, dread pooling in my gut at the thought. "I know, but she's good at turning things around on me." He sighed, scrubbing a hand through his hair. "Yeah, she's slick. But you're better than this, Adrian, you don't deserve her games." I thanked him and stood, his words steadying me just enough to keep going. I had to face her, but first, I needed the whole story, why she'd strung me along, what she was hiding. It was all there, waiting in those messages, and I'd dig it out, no matter how deep it cut. I woke up the next morning with a headache, the kind of pain that lingers and reminds you of everything you'd rather forget. The bed was empty beside me, no trace of Naomi's presence, just cold sheets and the faint indentation where she used to sleep. My stomach twisted as I lay there, staring at the ceiling, the events of last night crashing back into focus. She'd been deceiving me for months, and I'd been too caught up in my own routine to notice. I forced myself upright, swung my legs over the edge of the bed, and shuffled to the bathroom, where I splashed water on my face and studied the man looking back at me in the mirror. Bloodshot eyes, pale skin, but something sharper underneath, a determination I hadn't recognized in myself before. I wasn't going to let this slide, not today, not anymore. I grabbed my phone and sent her a message, short and to the point. "Can we talk? I'll be at the apartment around noon." Her response buzzed through almost instantly, "Sure, I'll come by. Is everything okay?" I left it unanswered, figuring she could stew in her own uncertainty. For once, I wasn't in the mood to reassure her. The morning dragged on as I moved through the apartment, picking up dishes crusted with last week's meals and folding laundry that had piled up in the corner, not because I wanted her to see the place looking decent, but because keeping busy was the only way to stop my brain from looping through those messages I'd found. I scrubbed the counters until my knuckles ached, dusted shelves I hadn't touched in months, and by the time the clock hit noon, the place looked almost respectable, though I felt like I'd been run over twice, nerves shot and hands trembling from the buildup of everything I needed to say. The doorbell chimed, cutting through the silence, and I took a long breath, bracing myself for what was coming. When I opened the door, there she was, Naomi, hair tied back loosely, dressed in a plain sweater and jeans, looking like she just rolled out of bed and decided this was no big deal. "Hey," she said, stepping past me, her gaze flickering around the room. "You cleaned up. Looks nice." I managed a tight smile that didn't feel real. "Yeah, figured it was overdue." She dropped onto the couch with a small sigh, and I sat across from her, keeping enough space between us to feel like I wasn't suffocating. "So, what's up?" she asked, her voice casual, but I caught the way her shoulders stiffened, the nervous twitch of her fingers as they toyed with the edge of her sweater. I'd run through this conversation in my head all night, planned every word, but now that she was here, my throat tightened, and I had to force myself to move. I reached for the iPad on the coffee table, swiped it unlocked, and pulled up the messages, the ones with Eli, the ones that had turned my life upside down. "I saw this last night," I said, keeping my tone even, though my chest felt like it was about to explode. I flipped the screen toward her, letting her see the photo, the text that had ripped through me like a blade. Her face drained of color, her mouth working soundlessly for a moment before she met my eyes, something flickering near panic, maybe, or defiance. "Adrian," she began, but I wasn't letting her off that easy. "Don't bother," I said, my voice climbing despite my efforts to stay calm. "I've read it all, Naomi. Months of this, months of you lying to my face." She flinched, hands knotting together in her lap. "It's not what you think," she said, her voice shaking. "Eli and I are just friends. That picture, it was nothing, just us messing around." I let out a laugh, sharp and ugly, and she recoiled. "Messing around? You're in his bed, Naomi. You're joking about me begging you to come back while you're cozied up with him. That's not nothing, that's you screwing me over." She shook her head, tears brimming now. "I didn't mean to hurt you, Adrian." I was lost, trying to figure things out. "Lost?" I snapped, standing up, pacing because sitting still wasn't an option anymore. "You walked out, told me you needed space, said you still loved me, and the whole time you were running to him, making me look like an idiot." She got up too, reaching for me, but I dodged her hand. "Please, just listen," she said. "I never stopped caring about you. Eli was different, exciting, something I didn't know I needed." "Exciting?" I repeated, my voice breaking despite myself. "What does that make me? The boring guy you kept on a leash while you figured out what you wanted?" She bit her lip, tears spilling over now. "No, you were steady, reliable. Eli, he pushed me, made me feel things I'd forgotten about." Her words landed hard, each one a fresh kick to the ribs. "So I was just the fallback," I said, quieter now, the fight draining out of me. "The safe option you could keep around while you played house with him." "That's not true," she shouted, stepping closer. "I loved you, I still do. I didn't know how to handle what I felt for both of you." I turned away, dragging a hand through my hair. "You could have told me, Naomi. You could have been straight with me instead of sneaking around." She grabbed my arm, forcing me to face her. "I didn't want to lose you. I thought I could sort it out without breaking everything." I yanked free, anger surging back. "You broke it anyway. Every lie, every time you went to him while pretending you were alone, you wrecked us." She sobbed, hands covering her face. "I'm sorry, Adrian. I know that. I wanted to buy it, to see the person I'd spent years with, but all I saw was the dishonesty staring back at me." "Sorry doesn't cut it," I said, my voice turning icy. "You've been jerking me around, and I'm done playing your game." Her eyes widened, fear creeping in. "What are you saying? Are you ending this?" I laughed again, empty and tired. "You ended it, Naomi. You wanted me as your safety net while you tested the waters." She shook her head hard. "I never saw you like that. I was scared, okay? Scared of losing what we had." I stepped closer, my voice dropping. "You've lost it now. You've got no trust left from me, no respect, nothing. You don't get to keep me and him, you pick, and you picked wrong. She sank back onto the couch, shaking, tears choking her words. Please, we can fix this. Counseling, whatever it takes, just don't walk away. I looked at her, feeling the pull to give in, to smooth it over like I always had, but that part of me was gone. It's over, I said, firm and final. You chose this when you lied. I can't believe in you anymore, and that's on you. She stood, wiping her face, her jaw tightening. Fine. If that's what you want, maybe it's better this way. Maybe we were never right. I nodded, her words settling like stones. Maybe we weren't. She grabbed her bag, heading for the door, then stopped, looking back. I did love you, Adrian. Still do, somehow. I said nothing, just watched her leave, the door clicking shut behind her. I stood there, staring at the space she'd left, the weight of 8 years pressing down, but underneath it, something else stirred, a faint release, a chance to figure out what came next, free of her shadow. After Naomi moved out, the apartment took on a different atmosphere, filled with a silence that seemed to echo with the remnants of our past life together. I walked through the rooms, my fingers brushing against the furniture we had chosen as a couple, items that once held shared meaning but now stood as relics of a broken trust. Anger simmered within me, steady and persistent, fueled by the realization that she had deceived me for months, treating my emotions as something to manipulate. I refused to let her walk away without facing the consequences of her actions, and that determination led me straight to my desk, where my computer waited, its screen a blank canvas for what I was about to create. I had been recording segments of my daily life for a short documentary project about finding inspiration in routine moments, a fact Naomi was well aware of since she had appeared in some of the footage herself, smiling for the camera when it suited her. What she didn't realize was that I had kept the cameras rolling even after she left, initially out of habit, but later because I sensed there was more to her departures than she admitted. Opening my editing software, I began reviewing the files, each clip a window into the reality she thought she could hide. There was footage of her sitting on the couch during one of her visits, her voice soft as she told me she needed time to sort out her feelings, insisting that her love for me remained intact. I remembered nodding at her words, wanting to believe her, holding on to the hope that we could rebuild what we had lost. Then I found another clip, timestamped just days later, where she sat in the same spot, her phone resting on the cushion beside her, its screen lighting up with a message from Eli that read, "Can't wait to see you tonight." She had glanced at it, smiled faintly, and continued talking to me as if nothing was amiss, while I stood in the kitchen, unaware, pouring coffee for us both. Digging deeper, I uncovered more moments like this, her words of affection to my face juxtaposed with evidence of her duplicity captured when she thought no one was watching. The most peace came from the iPad we once shared, where I had found a photo of her in Eli's bed, dated the same night she claimed to have been alone, missing me. I paired that image with an audio clip of her voice saying, "I cried myself to sleep last night, Adrian, it's so hard being apart," a statement that now rang hollow against the truth. I spent days immersed in the editing process, piecing together these fragments into a cohesive story, working late into the night with only the hum of the computer and the occasional sip of coffee to keep me company. My eyes burned from staring at the screen, but I pressed on, driven by a need to reclaim my voice and expose what she had done. When the film was complete, I named it The Intermission, a title that reflected the supposed break in our relationship that had instead been a stage for her betrayal. On a whim, I submitted it to a local indie film festival, expecting little, but within weeks, I received word that it had been accepted for screening, a development that both surprised and energized me. The night of the premiere arrived, and I took a seat at the back of the small theater, my pulse racing as the audience settled in to watch. The room darkened, and the film played out on the screen, my narration guiding viewers through the happy times, the growing doubts, and the eventual discovery of Naomi's affair, punctuated by the footage and the photo that laid her lies bare. I heard gasps from the crowd, saw heads shaking in disbelief, and when the credits rolled, a hush fell over the room before applause broke out, loud and sustained. During the Q&A that followed, a woman in the front row raised her hand and asked if the events were real. I paused, then answered, "Yes, this is my story," prompting a wave of murmurs through the audience. Another person inquired about my emotions while making the film, and I replied, it hurt to relive it, but putting it out there was the only way I could process it and move on. As I packed up afterward, a festival organizer approached me, his expression serious but enthusiastic, informing me that the film had struck a chord with viewers and they wanted to include it in their online showcase. I agreed, and within days, the intermission was available on the festival's website, quickly gaining traction as people shared it across social media platforms. Comments poured in, many expressing sympathy for me and anger toward Naomi, and before long, the film had gone viral, its reach far beyond anything I had anticipated. I was at home, reading through some of the online responses, when my phone buzzed with a call from Naomi. I ignored it, letting it go to voicemail, but she persisted, calling repeatedly until I finally picked up. "What do you want?" I asked, keeping my tone even despite the tension coiling inside me. Her voice came through sharp and frantic. "How could you do this, Adrian? You've turned everyone against me, my life is falling apart." I stayed calm, replying, "You brought this on yourself when you chose to lie and cheat, I just showed what happened." She continued, her words spilling out in a rush, "Take it down, please. I'm getting threats, my clients won't talk to me," but I interrupted, "That's your burden to carry now, not mine," and ended the call, my hands trembling slightly as I set the phone down. Later that evening, the doorbell rang, and when I opened it, Naomi stood there, her face flushed with anger and desperation. "You can't just hide behind your film," she said, pushing past me into the apartment. "You've twisted everything to make me the villain." I stood firm, crossing my arms, and responded, "I didn't twist anything, I showed the truth, exactly as it happened." She paced, her voice rising, "My reputation is gone, Adrian, no one will hire me now." I looked at her steadily and said, "You should have considered that before you started this mess." She stopped, tears welling up, and pleaded, "I messed up, I know that, but this is too much, please, I'm sorry." I shook my head, unmoved, and told her, "Sorry doesn't change what you did, and it doesn't undo the hurt you caused, time for you to go." I walked her to the door, and as she stepped out, I closed it behind her, feeling a sense of relief wash over me, the weight of her betrayal finally lifting from my shoulders. I kept walking, the night air sharp against my skin, cutting through the haze of everything that had just happened. The pain was still there, raw and jagged, like a splinter I couldn't pull out, but beneath it, something else flickered, a quiet resolve, a stubborn spark telling me I could rebuild. Not for her, not for the life we'd planned, but for myself. The apartment loomed ahead in my mind, waiting for me to step back into its silence, its empty spaces still thick with echoes of our 8 years together, her laugh, her voice, the way she'd hum off-key while cooking. It'd be hard to face, but I'd do it. I'd sort through the wreckage, box up what was hers, and start carving out something new. Tomorrow, I decided, I'd dig out my camera, brush the dust off the lenses, and see what I could capture again. It had been too long since I'd chased that part of myself, sidelined it to keep her happy, and I was done letting it sit dormant. Maybe I'd call Lena too, thank her for shaking me out of my self-pity last night, for reminding me I wasn't the one who'd failed here. For now, though, I just kept moving, letting the city lights stretch out ahead of me, their glow steady and indifferent. I'd survived the worst of it, Naomi's betrayal, the end of us, and I'd come out the other side. It wasn't over, not yet, but I was still standing, and that was enough to keep me going. The morning light poured through the windows of my apartment, illuminating a space that had transformed over the past few weeks into something I could finally recognize as my own. I stood in the living room, taking in the rearranged furniture, the shelves stripped of Naomi's random trinkets, and the walls now lined with my own photographied black and white prints from years ago that I'd dug out of storage and decided to reclaim. Everything about the place felt lighter, unburdened by the weight of what used to be, and I could sense that shift in myself too, standing there with a coffee mug in hand, letting the warmth seep into my palms. The couch still sat in the corner, the one where Naomi had perched during our final exchange, her voice cracking as she tried to explain herself, but that memory didn't claw at me anymore, it just existed, faded like an old photograph left too long in the sun. I set the mug down and picked up a cardboard box from the floor, one of the last traces of her I hadn't dealt with yet, ready to sort through it and decide what stayed and what went for good. Inside the box, I found a mess of keepsakes, letters she'd written early on, stubs from concerts we'd gone to, a handful of Polaroids capturing us in moments I'd once thought would last forever. My fingers brushed over one of the photos, a shot of us on a windy beach, her hair a wild tangle and my arm slung around her like it was the most natural thing in the world. For a brief moment, I could almost hear the waves and her laughter, but I didn't let myself linger there too long, knowing that dwelling on it wouldn't rewrite the past or undo what she'd done. I dropped the photo back into the box, folded the flaps shut, and grabbed the tape to seal it, figuring I'd shove it into a closet later or maybe just haul it to the curb. Either way, it wasn't my problem anymore. My phone buzzed on the table, cutting through the quiet, and I glanced at the screen to see Lena's name pop up with a text. "Hey, you surviving the cleanup? Need a hand?" I grinned, typing back, "Think I've got it handled, but thanks for checking in." She sent a quick thumbs up, and I set the phone down, appreciating how she'd been there through the worst of it, always blunt but never letting me fall too far. While I sifted through the rest of my stuff, my mind started drifting back over everything that had happened. The gut punch of finding out about Naomi's affair, the way it unraveled me at first, then lit a fire under me to confront her and take control of what came next. I poured all of that into the intermission, the film that started as a way to process my own mess and ended up hitting a nerve with people I'd never even met, judging by the flood of messages still coming in from strangers who'd seen it online. It was strange to think something so personal had spiraled out into the world like that, but it gave me a weird kind of satisfaction, knowing my story had landed with others who'd been through their own versions of the same shit. I changed through it all too, figured out how to quit bending over backwards for people who didn't deserve it, and learned to trust my own gut instead of ignoring the red flags waving in my face. That didn't make the sting of it all disappear, but it sure as hell made me feel like I could stand taller now, like I'd earned the right to decide what my life looked like from here on out. The doorbell jolted me out of my head, and I opened it to find Mark standing there, holding a six-pack and wearing that same easy grin he always had. "Thought you might be drowning in boxes by now, brought reinforcements," he said, stepping inside and handing me a beer. I laughed, popping the cap off mine and settling onto the couch with him, glad for the break and the company after hours of sorting through my own thoughts. We bullshitted for a while about nothing heavy, his job, some game he'd watched, a movie he swore I had to see, until the conversation inevitably circled back to Naomi, because of course it did. "You heard from her lately, with the film blowing up and all?" he asked, keeping his tone casual but watching me close. I shook my head, leaning back against the cushions. "She called a couple times, but I let it go to voicemail, nothing worth saying left between us." He nodded, taking a swig of his beer. "Good call. She dug her own hole, man, let her lie in it." I stared at the bottle in my hand, rolling it between my palms. "Yeah, still sucks though, knowing it went down like that." Mark shrugged, unfazed. "Can't fix her choices, you just keep doing what's right for you." He had a point, and it stuck with me after he took off later, leaving me alone again with the hum of the city outside and a quiet that didn't feel so suffocating anymore. I wandered over to the window, looking out at the sprawl of lights flickering against the night, and started thinking about what I wanted next, not just what I had to get through. Maybe I'd hit the road for a while, head west with my camera and chase down some new shots, landscapes, people, whatever caught my eye, something to shake off the dust and remind me there was more out there than this apartment I'd been wading through. I grabbed my camera off the shelf, flipping through the old photos still loaded on it, images of places I'd been and faces I still cared about, and felt a spark of something I hadn't in a while, anticipation, maybe, or just the urge to move forward. I set it down and caught my reflection in the mirror across the room, seeing a guy who looked steadier than he had in months, ready to take on whatever was coming without flinching. The hurt Naomi left behind hadn't vanished, but it didn't own me anymore either. I'd figured out how to carry it and still keep going, and that was enough for now.